Everyone, and welcome to Medit Chabad's first virtual Q&A. My name is Shimona Tzukernick, and I'm really happy to be your host this evening. We have a couple of announcements, so I'm going to read that off, just describe what's happening this evening. We're going to go through a general introduction. I'll give some kind of a couple of minutes on matches, getting married, seeking one's mate, and then go through the questions that you sent in. I know that an email went out inviting people to submit their questions, and as I read them, they were very thoughtful and interesting. It became clear that there were a couple of groups to those questions, quite a few about money, so we'll be speaking about that, what to look for in a partner, how to date, and then how do I know that this is the person for me. So that's what we're going to do. I'll give the general intro, we'll go through the questions, and then at the end, there'll be time to answer questions that you send in. So just kind of feel free to put something in through the chat if you want as we're going along. It could be on something I'm saying or something that is completely different that hasn't come up in the questions. So welcome, and let's get started. As I was thinking about this topic, a story came to mind about a sage in the Talmud. His name was Rabbi Yossi Bar Chalafta. He was approached by a Roman noblewoman who liked to explore philosophy. She asked him many questions, and one of the questions that she presented to him was, what has God been doing since he created the world? There's many ways of understanding her question. I'm not going into that now, but let's look at the answer. He said to her, he's been making matches, setting up couples, zivugim in Hebrew, mazaveg zivugim. He has been bringing couples together. She thought that this was ludicrous at some level, and she took her servants the following day and said, I can do that. And she put people together, this one with this one, that one with that one, etc. And of course, things didn't turn out so well. When you think about finding your soulmate, it's really miraculous how many variables need to happen. You know, I was engaged twice. My first fiance passed away a couple of days before my wedding, so I had two sets of matches that went on. But that match, it was really interesting. I happened to have to go into an office that I normally didn't go into on a particular day. Oh, this was my second match, and when I went into the office, someone who happened to be there on my off day saw me and thought of me for my husband, and really, it's like, what did it take? I had to have forgotten something that I needed to go into the office, and she had to be there exactly at the same time at the machine that I went to, etc. Think about what it takes to bring you and your soulmate together, and one's really looking at the creator of the universe orchestrating all the details of the universe. I knew someone who went to visit her grandmother in a hospital, and when she walked out, someone saw her and found out about her because she thought of this woman for her own son. So it's those kinds of details. So when people say it's difficult for me, it's not an easy journey. Of course it's not. There's all these metaphysical realities that have to happen in order for us to come to our soulmate. The second thing I wanted to point out in a general way is that when we look at marriage, most of us tend to look at it from a perspective of humanism, which is, you know, people evolved. If you look at it even from an evolutionary perspective, people evolved from more crude beings to sophisticated beings, and then it didn't feel so comfortable just to mate and leave yourself, or the human brain became so sophisticated that it needed a longer time to be a child and be educated and socialized by one's parents. And so marriage kind of evolved out of that. That marriage was a byproduct of human evolution. And even putting that aside, many people will think of marriage as being humanistic. It's about my personal gratification, having a partner, being together with someone. Two is better than one. That's all true. But from a Torah perspective, from a Jewish perspective, marriage is something much bigger than that. Marriage is a mitzvah, a commandment that helps us refine the world, make this world purer and brighter and holier. It's not only so that we can build society per se, but so that we can create a world where godliness is felt and comfortable, where God feels comfortable. The first Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, speaks about dira b'tachtonim, a dwelling place in the lower worlds. And I once heard someone speaking, why do we speak about this world being a home for God? And the answer was given, I think it was Rabbi Simon Jacobson actually who said it. When you're on the street, you're kind of showing a certain vibe to the world. But when you come through the threshold of your home and you enter your own home, that's where you can really be. And what we want is to make this world a place where God can be who He is. Of course, He's everywhere, but we want God to be manifest, godliness to be manifest. And marriage is one of the primary ways that comes about. The last thing that I wanted to share before we come to the questions is this. There's a fascinating teaching by the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. His name is Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. And he gives a beautiful analogy for marriage. He says there's dating and the engagement and the marriage. Dating can be compared to the raw materials for a home. The engagement is the foundation for the home, and the marriage is the house itself. It's really worthwhile to think about that. Many people go out, they might be attracted to someone, but don't feel culturally so comfortable with that person. They might feel that they're really drawn to this person, but the family dynamics are something that they're not crazy about, etc. So when they're going out, there's something that's going to pull them, kind of schlep them along and say, yes, I want to be in, I want to be in. Think about it carefully, because when you are going out, what you see are the raw materials. People don't change just because they love you. You don't change just because you love yourself. This is not something that is easy for us to do. So those raw materials are things that are given, solid. It's not going to change. You come to the engagement, now you're establishing a foundation for your future marriage. The way you conduct yourself, etc., is going to be significant. In a traditional Jewish marriage, the engagements, well, there have been times where there were very long engagements, and there were reasons for that. If anyone's interested, we can come back to that at the end. And there are communities where engagements are really very short. But the house that you built is going to be dependent upon those raw materials. You know, I know a woman, she was going out, and this is, I don't even remember her name, but she had mentioned to me that the guy that she was dating revealed a really nasty side to her on the first date. And I said to her, wow, like, that's something serious. I would pay attention to that. Let's say being very rude to someone, or aggressive, or telling someone to get out of a car while you're driving. Those kinds of things. Something severe happened, and she was really attracted to this guy. There was something that was drawing her to him. She married him, and many years later she landed up in a shelter. I'm not saying, God forbid, I'm not wishing bad on anyone, but what I'm saying is when you see something in someone, that that is very telling, and especially what's revealed on a first date. Often you'll see how people relate to a waiter, to someone who's serving, how they're driving. Those things are very telling. So the raw materials, the foundation, and then the marriage itself. All right, so we actually, although it may seem very superficial, we got a lot of questions about money, and I'm going to start with that because I don't think that it is superficial. I think that it's a very important question, and I'm going to read the first three questions about money to you and then answer them generically. The first was really general. Why such a madness about money? The next, do you believe that Jewish women, obviously a guy wrote this, in this generation are too materialistic and money hungry? If so, what, if anything, can be done to re-educate them? Well, I'll speak about that question. And the last one about money has got to do with the fact that the cost of living is very high, and especially if you're looking at a Jewish lifestyle, private education, kosher food, the holidays, etc., very expensive. So the question was given at the beginning: how can a man approach this without offending the woman? Shouldn't she also collaborate? So I wanted to go through these one by one. Hopefully, we can flay things apart in a useful way. The first thing is that money matters. It does matter. God could have created the world where we didn't have to work for our bread. That was actually one of the curses to Adam. Chava was punished with difficulty in pregnancy and childbirth and also rearing children. Adam, the snake, was punished that it would go on its belly and that whatever it eats would taste of dust. But Adam was punished that by the sweat of his brow he would eat bread, meaning it was difficult. It's difficult to earn a living. And if you think about it, God could have made us like plants. We could have photosynthesized the light. We could have dug our feet into the soil, and we wouldn't have had to make a living. We would have just lived from the environment. I know that there are people who today claim to be breatharians. I'm not quite sure how that works, although energetically, of course, the divinity of Hashem is in the air. Or Hebrew is light and Avir is air, and the only difference in the Avir, there's the letter Yud, for any of you who speak Hebrew, which is the presence of God is in the atmosphere, that's for sure. Anyway, coming back to what I was saying, God set us up in a way where we need each other. Men need women and women need men. That's how procreation happens. And we need each other financially, and that sets up community, and it is through community that we become whole, that we help other people become whole, and that the world becomes whole. And that's why Job says, Adam la'amal yulad, a person is born to work. There's something about money that reflects the mission of a person in this world. From a mystical perspective, there are sparks in everything that we own, and we have to elevate those sparks, whether it be in the actual money, which is a representation, or the objects that we own. I mention this because I want us to understand that although money is superficial, it's not important, right? It doesn't truly give the value. It's not reflecting the value of a person's soul, but the mission of a person in this world is connected to their money. I remember learning that the Lubavitcher Rebbe would honor rich people. He had a millionaires club. I mean, this was, back in the 70s and 80s when being a millionaire was really a much greater exception than it is today. And someone said to me, why did the Rebbe do that? Isn't that superficial? And the answer that was presented was that when a person has great wealth, it means that they've been entrusted with many sparks of holiness. So there to elevate, because we elevate the objects that we own. So I'm mentioning this, I think that we tend to say, well, I'm a spiritual person and money doesn't matter at all. It does. But now let's come to the next question, which is, aren't the question was asked about women, aren't women too materialistic? I don't know that it's only woman, maybe, and I'm not saying this is you, I'm just giving a general trend. Maybe women are more concerned about a man's earning potential and men are more concerned about a woman's looks. That historically and traditionally has been the case. And I think that it's still the case today. So when men say, oh, let's have a re-education program for women, I don't know that you can re-educate something as basic as that. I'll give you an example of something that's really basic when you're dating, is the skin and the pallor of another person, of a person. You wouldn't think that it's important, but the first human being, Adam, was called Adam, connected also to the word dam, blood. Human beings are the only creatures that blush. But also the color of the skin is a very big indication, the health of the skin. It's the biggest organ in the body. And the color of the skin is an indication of how healthy this person is. So it's not just superficial to look at externalities. I'm not saying that if someone doesn't have perfect skin or a huge bank account, you shouldn't marry them. Not at all. But I am saying that those things factor in because they play out over the course of a person and a couple's lifetime. So when it comes to values in choosing a spouse, I would remind everyone that there is a teaching of the sages that says, Ezu asher sameach b'chelkoi, who is wealthy, one who is happy with their lot. You can count your money, but you can't count wealth. Wealth is a state of mind. It isn't. It's not money. You could go to the bank. You could open a safe. You could count that money. Fine, but wealth, you can't count wealth. And there are people. I was just in Africa for a couple of months. It's astonishing to the contrast between America and Africa and the poverty that is there, the impact, of whatever. Just, it was remarkable to me. And yet, people who live often on the line of starvation, they're not starving, but they're close to it, very thin. People in tattered garments are extremely happy. Part of that is connected. I don't know if some of you may have read the Dopamine Nation by Anne Lemke. Fascinating, and she speaks about how hardship, physical hardship, especially if it's entered into intentionally, can give us higher dopamine levels, but certainly happiness, a sense of wealth, well-being, that really derives from one's consciousness. And I advise everyone, whether it's a woman or a man, to think about that long-term impact of who you're going to marry. You live with the person, not with the money that the person has. I do want to add to that this question about what can be done to educate women. I think it's educating all of us. A man once called me and he asked what size a woman's dress was, and that didn't go over well. I said to him, I won't ask you what color your beard is, but I know that when you're 60, it will be a different color, just as her dress size will be a different size. This kind of a, attachment to externality is really destroying things. And there's a very interesting documentary by the BBC on beauty. John Cleese was in the documentary, and one of the things that was pointed out in one of the series was people used to see very few perfectly beautiful people in the course of their lifetime. Today, with Photoshops and billboards, they see exceptionally beautiful people all the time. But you know, the strange thing is that even the models don't look like the models. So I really encourage men in terms of physical beauty and women in terms of financial status to consider that, but to go beyond that and really look at the inner life of a person. I do want to mention something. There is a concept of a YouTube in matches, you know, like in science we did that. There's the U, and that it's open at both ends. If you put water into a YouTube here, it's going to come and meet its level. Water meets its level. It's not going to be higher on one side or lower on the other, etc. And that I learned from my sister, who's a brilliant therapist. She always says, you've got to look in a couple, water meets its level. So when where one member of a couple is lacking, the other may not be lacking in exactly the same way. When it comes to relationships, don't compare apples to apples, compare apples to oranges. I might be lacking in one area, but my husband is not lacking there, and he's lacking in one area and I'm not in the other. The last question that I want to address, there were others, but that I do want to address, was this one about can't a woman also collaborate? So I want to speak about the obligations of men and women in a traditional marriage, but there is a caveat. There are two kinds of marital contracts that a woman can go into. One is being supported by her husband. If she is supported by her husband, the money that she earns belongs to him, meaning he's taking care of her and all of her needs, whether it's mortgage or rent, health insurance, clothing, food, social life, travel, anything that she wants. So she has the leisure to work, then her money goes to him. But there is another contract that a woman can go into. It's actually much more progressive, I would say, than any secular law that is out there today. And that is Zan ani, I sustain myself, or Maisa Yodalatsmi, and I keep the work of my hand, I keep for myself. In that kind of scenario, so there the woman says, I don't need you to support me. I have a job and I will support myself. Their shared expenses are shared equally. So let's say there's a mortgage, they'll share the cost of the mortgage, the taxes, the utilities, upkeep, maintenance, food, etc. And then anything else. So she might have her bank account and he his bank account, and then there's a joint one. I'm not sure how that would actually work, and that goes for the costs of the household, etc. So I just wanted to point that out, that Torah does allow for a woman or a couple to, I think it's upon her, because the general expectation is that a man will support his wife. Here's another thought on that. Before birth control, really, if you look at feminism, the way it evolved was the Industrial Revolution freed up time. It didn't take so much time to live your life, just to spin thread. Machines did that. The word spinster is from the word spin, because that's what the spinsters did. They spent most of a woman's life was spent spinning thread, and now, you know, our thread is synthetic, etc. So the Industrial Revolution freed women up, and then the pill changed things remarkably, because women weren't having children at the rate that they were previously. And that allowed them to go into the workforce. But when women went into the workforce, you doubled the labor, so you halved the value of the labor. And that's probably why in 1940s America, 1950s, a man could support his household and it would be enough. But in 2020s, that's very difficult. It's extremely difficult for one person, in most cases, to support a Jewish household where the cost of living is very high. So I'm not mandating or saying what has to be. I'm just putting out there what kind of options are available to people as they move forward and navigate their relationships. If you want to really know what's going on somewhere, you have to follow the money trail. And money will tell you a lot about the health or the absence of health in a relationship. All right, so now we come to priorities. What to look for, what's the most important thing. Just giving you a heads up, the questions. What do you think is the most important thing to look for when coming to marry and build a Jewish home together? What are the 3 tips for finding your soulmate? And if I don't find the person physically attractive, is that sufficient reason to break off? There were some others that I'll try and get to as well. I think that the main priorities in choosing a partner are this: reverence. A person has to have a sense of a power greater than themselves. If you don't believe in something greater than yourself that you can make way for, then how on earth can you make way for another person? It just doesn't happen. It's very difficult to work on ourselves, to master ourselves, and there has to be something bigger than who we are. So in Torah we call that Yirat Shamayim, Yirat Shamayim. It's a reverence of God, something bigger than I am. The second thing I would say is Lev Tov, good-heartedness. You know, a person's ideas could be different from yours. Republicans can marry Democrats, and Democrats can marry Republicans, and you know, there's Jews of all different natures. We are so much more than that. What's really important is the heart, and we learn this from the first match in the Bible. If you want to really understand finding your soulmate and getting married, go and look in Genesis. It's the story of Eliezer finding Rebecca, and bringing her back to Isaac as his soulmate. The two of them got married, and there's many things. We learn the laws of marriage from that story. The question is asked. I learned this from my teacher, Rebbetzin Heller of blessed memory, Yehudis Heller. She said, why did Abraham send his servant Eliezer to his family? Lavan and Bethuel, his relatives, they weren't great people. I'm not going to go in now to all the things we know. They were quite degenerate people in terms of their philosophies, idolatrous. But she said, because there was something in the heart that was good. In the land of Canaan at the time, the people who lived there had rotten midos, rotten emotional attributes. So when you're choosing someone, you want a person who is kind and good-hearted. Eliezer noted that Rebecca was willing to give water to him, and not only to him, but to the camels. I once figured out how long that must have taken. Hours, really. I mean, to water all of those camels. If you think about camels having gone through the desert and they needed water in the trough. So you're looking at someone who can go beyond their comfort zone, be there for another person, who has a certain refinement of character. Your character is connected to the midos. You also want aligned goals. And, you know, if one of you, I'll give you an example. My daughter got married, and her husband, they wanted to go and build an outreach center. Her husband wanted to go to some far and exotic place. That hadn't been her initial goal, but she was fine to align herself with that goal. They looked at South Vietnam and South Korea and I think Rwanda before they landed up in Costa Rica. So they're kind of out in the boondocks a little bit. It wasn't her vision, but it was something that she could align herself with. Another thing that is essential, so I would say the essentials, because the goals, you have to become aligned, but you don't have to be that way a priori. Basic goals you have to have as similar. Do you want to have a home that is an Orthodox home? Do you want to send your kids, etc.? Do you want to insist that they have a religious education? That kind of thing. But I would say reverence, good-heartedness, and attraction. You have to be attracted to the person. And I know that dating has changed from when I was going out, certainly. There were no cell phones. And what we learn from the story of Isaac and Rebecca is that you have to see each other and see each other in the flesh before they couldn't get married. You have to act. You could develop a relationship. You could have a relationship that's going on for months, but until you actually see each other, that's it. You can't commit to being in a marriage. So those are the things that I think are really important: reverence, good-heartedness, and attraction. And you also want to have basic aligned goals. What are my top 3 tips? Really, I'll give you 2, and those are, they're quite related. My main tip is don't have sex until you get married. Really, if you want to know that you're marrying the right person, because what it does is it artificially pushes the relationship forward. And I use that word specifically or intentionally because you could think of physical relations as being bound by lust. That would be unhealthy or addictive. There's sex, which is just a physical act. And then there's intimacy, which is an aim where there's physical relations and the soul is present. The person is present. It's 2 souls and 2 bodies engaging with each other. And what happens today is that people become intimate and they have relations and they are in a relationship when they shouldn't be in one. So my second tip was beware of the watering hole. In the Torah, and I'll connect these, in the Torah, we see that many of the couples, the shidduchim, the matches, happen at a well. So Eliezer meets Rebecca at the well, and Jacob meets Rachel at the well, and Moses meets Zipporah at the well. What the significance of the well is also the wellspring of Torah, and it's teaching us that this water of Torah has to sustain the relationship. Unfortunately, today people go to the bar. That's the watering hole. It's not a well. And then what happens? You've got a little, you know, you're a little woozy. You feel loose and you feel connected, but it's artificially connected. You're going out romancing someone. The lights are low, the food is great. It's very easy to be confused when that's the case. And, you know, a number of years ago, this is over 20 years ago, I was speaking at a university, And I was speaking on dating, also different scene back then. Maybe it was 30 years ago. And it was for students in their first 4 years. But there was a postgrad student who came to the lecture, and I had been saying, be careful, don't give yourself away to a person. That is so intimate. Your body is so intimate. I mean, if the Me Too movement hasn't taught us that, then what a waste of so much agony and so much ink in the press, because really there is something very sacred and holy about that relationship. Anyway, this postgrad student said she wanted to share something at the end. I'll never forget this. She said, I totally hear what you're saying. I spent 4 months getting into a relationship, 4 months, no, 3. I had said you spent 3 months getting into a relationship, 3 months in the relationship, 3 months getting out of the relationship, and 3 months recovering from the relationship. That's what I shared. I mean, maybe hookup culture today is different. But this student said, that's exactly what I did. I spent my 4 undergrad years with 4 different men, and I'm left on my own. There's nothing for me to show for it. So I really caution you. You know, here's my yardstick. If you don't share a bank account, don't share a bed. It's quite simple. But people don't seem to relate to intimacy in the same way. Interestingly, in Hebrew, the word for sex and for money are the same. God says to Adam, Hamin ha'etz hazeh achalta, did you eat from the tree? The word min is relations, the word man is manna, bread, and the word man is also money. The word money comes from the Hebrew word moneh, which is from the word man. It comes from the word moneta. She was the goddess of money, but originally, etymologically, it comes from manna, man. It's all the same thing. The food, the intimacy, and the money. These are very important aspects of a relationship. There are 3 mitzvahs of a woman that are connected to it that really contain and direct those drives in a Jewish marriage. All right, so now the next question that came up is, if I don't find a person physically attractive, is this a sufficient reason for not going on a date, or should I push myself to give it a try? Look, I can't give a blanket answer. Sometimes, you know, I went on dates, I got in the car and I was like, oh, this guy's not mine. I was so clear. I just knew like that. But I you know, was polite and went out and then said goodbye at the end of the night, and I declined to go out again. Because it was so clear to me. But if you have a question, then go out. I mentioned I was engaged and twice, lost my first fiancé before the wedding. I was not particularly attracted to him. And what was remarkable to me is I was encouraged to go out again. He was such an unusual and wonderful person. That he grew on me. And I tell you, attraction is so much more than appearance. I want to add something here. There could be things about the physique of a person that bothers you. The smell of a person. You know, when you're stressed, your stress hormones radiate, I think it's 6 inches out of your body. When you're happy, your hormones are all around you. That's the aura that is about you. And when you walk into a room and someone's been walking around that room, or you're sitting in a car with someone, you're going to smell them. And interestingly, the word for adultery, don't commit adultery, is tinaf, lo tinaf, don't commit adultery. And when I worked on the course for the Ten Commandments, was doing for Sinai scholars, I was doing research, and one of the things I came across was a commentator who says that you can break that word apart to lo tein af, don't give your nose. Don't pay attention to the smell of another woman. Isn't that interesting? So you might find someone smells in a way that the odor of their body isn't pleasing to you. Not that they have bad body odor. I'll give you an example. A couple who lived together for many years got married, and then they decided to have a baby, and for the first time in many years she went off the pill, and so for the first time in many years ever he smelled her, and he could not bear the smell of her body. Something like that is significant, and pay attention to it. A woman once came to me, she said, this guy is just amazing, but the sound of his voice grates on me. Should I say no? And I said, well, can you live with his voice every day till you're 90? And she said, oh my God, no, I'll go crazy. And I said, well, there's your answer. Just say no. Because if you can't marry someone and hate them for their voice. That's their voice print. That's who they are. So these things, it might sound like I'm being contradictory to you, but I think that this and this are true, that attraction is so much more than appearance. And the more you know someone, the better you know someone, the more beautiful they appear to you. And if it's a male-female relationship, often the more attraction there is. I've worked with couples, where the wife cannot believe that her husband had an affair with the woman he had the affair with. She's more beautiful, she's more svelte, she's put together. This is no, that's not what is really driving, God forbid, that kind of relationship. The other questions were here in terms of priorities. Let me just have a look. I'll answer this just generally, was how can you figure out quickly if a person wants a serious relationship or not? And one woman said, the man I'm dating is the man I want to marry, but he wants to wait. Folks, I go back to one of those principles, really staying out of bed, not having a relationship. That once a woman came to me, she had been dating for years and years, decades, and she couldn't get married. And I said, well, she was gorgeous. I said, you can't have relations with these guys. And she said, if I don't have relations, they won't continue to go out with me. I said, well, the right one will. And within months, she got engaged, and she always writes to me on her anniversary. In terms of waiting to get married, I was once at a campus, and a young woman said, well, my boyfriend and I, we really want to get married, but we can't because we don't have the money. And I said, just sit down and figure it out. Your mom's paying for an apartment for you, and his mom, his parents for him. And you both get a food stipend from your parents, and you both have a little job on the side. Like, I'm sure you could figure it out. And they did. They got married because there is a way to make it work. You don't have to have money in order to get married. It's such a tragic thing. You create that. My husband and I both came to America. I had 2 suitcases, he had 1. And when we bought our house, it's this 4-story double duplex with a basement, thank God. It took us many years, but we did it. And I just said, look, our suitcases turned into a house. It's amazing. And that's what happened with Jacob. We see in the Parsha recently, he left Israel. He had a staff, our father Jacob, he had a staff, and he came back. He met his brother with enormous, enormous wealth. And he says, "B'makli avarti so Yarden." I crossed over with just my staff, and it became this great wealth because of Hashem's blessing, because of God's blessing. So my recommendation is get married. And I don't know who this person is who said, I want to marry the man I'm dating, but he wants to wait till he finishes his degree. I have a very good friend who is a shlucha. She's a rebbitzin at a college campus, and just really one of the most wonderful people. We don't speak often, but I consider her a very dear friend. And when I was there on the campus a while ago, she said to me, and she has kids and she has a bunch of kids. She said, you can't imagine how these young women come and they pick up the children and they love the children. And some of them are even married, like they're the risky ones. They've taken the risk and gotten married, but everyone's telling them don't have kids. She said, when do you want to have kids? Like, it takes so much energy. Have those children, have those babies when you're young, get married when you're young, build your life together, build your wealth together, and you adjust and grow together. So those are my thoughts, and certainly from a Torah perspective, long relationships are not encouraged at all. All right. I want to leave time for the text questions, but two here. What types of, now we're moving on to how to date and what about the first date. So regarding the first date, what types of topics should I discuss on a first date? My recommendation is just enjoy yourself, have a good time, and just share what interests you, what interests the other person. You're picking up so much information about each other on that first date. If any of you have read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink, you might remember that he speaks there about marriages and lasting marriages where people said in the blink of an eye, that people knew in the blink of an eye. We know what happens. You'll know yes or no. We do things to confuse ourselves. So, like one of the suggestions I'm really giving for how to move relationships forward is don't muddy the waters. It's very clear. Things are clear. And then we go and we overly romance each other, and we get drunk and we, dance and have relations, and then everyone's just confused. But if you didn't do that, things would be much clearer. So I recommend on a first date spending time just talking, getting to know each other. Don't go too deep. Then someone said, well, how do I ask questions without it feeling like an interview? I wouldn't do that on a first date. But once you're going out more, you want to find out who this person is sooner rather than later. Let's say you're divorced and you have kids. You want to talk about that before you fall for the guy. You don't want to be full in and he's still in the back of his mind, I really like her, but those kids, etc., right? Any of those kinds of things, you want to actually, you do want to broach those topics. And I think the difference between casual dating and dating to marry is that those important questions are going to come up sooner rather than later. So there was another question, how do I know if I can touch or hug on a first date? I'm not in that culture. From a Torah perspective, we don't do it. But even psychologically, I work as a somatic therapist. A person's space is really quite sacred, and you don't want to impinge on that. There really has to be I wouldn't recommend it on a first date, let's put it that way. And then let's end with this. There's two questions that I think were important in how will I know. One is, how do you know you found the one? And two, how do I know when to compromise and when not to compromise? So, how do you know when you found the one is a mystery? You will know. You will know enough. Let's put it that way. There is no absolute certainty for anyone. I mean, you can't be certain what you're going to be doing at the end of the evening or tomorrow morning. So to ask for certainty from another person and from a relationship, that's just unrealistic. We're not looking for certainty, but you are looking for a sense of comfortable knowing. And when I teach in the seminary, which is a much more Orthodox Hasidic environment, there the matches are made. Parents are doing research about guys and gals and putting their children together. One of the things, they're adults, I mean, they're not children, they don't mean to be offensive, but they're the adult children of their parents. Those young women, I tell them, your parents have done a lot of the head work. It makes sense on paper, but now you have to see each other. Is there a vibe? Is there the attraction? And all those things that you're picking up that you don't even know you're picking up because the brain is reading. We're reading each other all the time. So I would recommend really feeling in to the heart. How do I feel about it? As I said, you have to recognize those other things. There has to be the attraction and the good-heartedness and the reverence. But now you've got to feel like I can build a life with this person. I think that our expectations have become way overdone. Our relationships are collapsing under the weight of our expectations. I would not. It's like people come with such long lists. It astonishes me. I have a friend, she's from Iran, and she says in Iran, when they were children, the Arabs would want to marry the Jewish girls, and they'd approach the fathers. So the only way they could get out of that is say that she was already betrothed. And the way they did that is that as soon as a daughter was born, she was betrothed to someone in the community, another Jewish family. And she says, well, you know, you'd find wives that were taller than their husbands and different sizes and different personalities. They had a saying in Iran, you go into the wedding in white and you leave it in white, which was the bridal gown and the shrouds. I'm not saying we should get married that way, but what I am saying is that our list of expectations is so overdone. It's just not allowing us to really be happy. Your partner is not the one who has to make you happy. That's not his job. Your job is to make yourself happy. And together, you refine each other, make each other more holy, complete people. All right, and then how do I know when I should compromise? That is a really important and difficult question, and I'm sorry that I can't answer it flat out. It's because it's too subtle. You know, the Talmud has a saying, a teaching, and even this I don't think applies today in the same way, but in some way it does. The Talmud says, a woman says better two than one, meaning I'd rather marry the wrong guy than be alone. Now, that was in an era where women had no means of supporting themselves, so getting married was certainly a way of being supported. I think that that's still a big factor for people today if we're talking realistically. You can't marry someone you don't like or don't want to be with, but there are times I have seen people happy that they married someone who wasn't whom they thought they would marry. They married a different kind of person, and they're very happy that they did. They're happy for the companionship, or they're happy that they had a child, etc. So that's a really subtle and very important question, and to the person who asked it or anyone else who is asking it, I suggest that you speak with someone about it. As the Baal Shem Tov says, our eyes look out, they don't look in. So speaking to someone else is really useful. Okay, so I think that there are some other questions that came in. Let me just have a look. One sec, folks. Got to load that down. All right. How do I know when I'm ready for dating or marriage? Great. And the other one is how to recognize what is good for you. Nice questions. All right. So, well, I would say that you have to have a sense that you will be okay, that you've individuated enough from your parents. So that's one thing. You can't be attached to them as mommy and daddy. They have to be mom and dad. And you have to have an internal sense of resilience and being robust, that you could bounce back. You don't need them to look after you. You're happy to kind of leave the nest and connect with someone else. The second thing I would say is that you might feel that there are some emotional snags or issues that you have to work through. If it's really big, if there are major issues that have happened in your life, I think that it's appropriate to try and attend to that before you get married. But don't think that you have to be a whole and perfect person in order to get married. Not at all. We go through a whole lot of work, avoda, we call it, spiritual refinement in our lives, and it goes in different phases. Some of it is as children of our parents in their home, some of it is living on our own, and then being in a marriage. Getting married is going to grow you up and refine you in a way that you just can't conceive of before. So again, I'm not giving a specific, but I would say you have a sense that you've dealt with it. Sometimes I'll just give a really uncomfortable example, but it might be useful. I'm just thinking about things that I work with. A man is addicted to pornography, or a woman has experienced molestation. You don't have to fix that up completely in order to get married, but you definitely have to attend to it. And I think that those things need to be discussed with your potential mate. But if it's run-of-the-mill kind of life, we all, when we're young, think we're more invincible than we are, I think. So go for it. It's good to get married when you're young, and you'll grow together with your husband or your wife. How to recognize what is good for you? Well, what drives you, you know? What interests you? Which kind of people are you drawn to? It's not so different when you're choosing a soulmate from just choosing a friend in a certain respect, right? When I'm at a gathering, I know which people interest me. Someone's at the table talking, and I think to myself, oh, that's like, you know, that's really interesting. I want to know more. I'd like to speak further with that person. So that person is someone that I can engage with. Some people bore me, or I find them to be superficial. Look at yourself. And as I said, water meets its level. Think about the YouTube. We're live speaking about matches on YouTube, but there's something deep in this idea of water meeting its level. Where are you holding in your life? That's kind of what you can be looking for in the vicinity. If you're a mess, then someone who has their life together isn't going to want to be with you, and you wouldn't feel comfortable with them. So get your own house in order, and then go out and build your married house. So I think that that's it. Is that correct, folks? Are we? Well, there's another question. Okay, so I just want to say to people before we end, because I think there might be an announcement. Thanks for spending time with me, and to everyone. There's a whole team here. You at the back end don't know, but there's a whole team, and I want to thank them. Did you want to?